Hey students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is supranational states, and here are your objectives. Pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab and take some notes. A supranational state is an organization of 3 or more countries with a shared objective or goal. When countries join supranational states, power moves upwards. Take a second to copy this definition down, and then I will explain what I mean when I say that power moves upwards. In the last lesson, you saw this hierarchy of power within a state. The central government is at the top of the hierarchy because it has power over the entire country. Below that are regional governments, which only have power over certain regions. You also learned that during a process called devolution, the central government gives up certain powers to the regional governments. So power is transferred downwards from the scale of the state to the scale of a sub-state region. But now let's imagine that instead of transferring power downwards, the central government transfers powers to a government above it at a scale above the state level. In other words, what if there were a government that not only had power over the entire country, but had power over other countries as well? That government is what we call a supranational state. Supra is a prefix meaning above, and the supranational state is above the level of its members. Its government makes decisions that all the countries that are members of that supranational state must follow. One example is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO is a supranational state that includes the US and 29 other countries, and decisions that are made by NATO affect all of those countries. So when a country joins NATO, it is agreeing to follow the decisions that NATO makes. The central government of that country is no longer the ultimate authority. Instead, there's a higher power above it that it must now follow. So power has moved upwards from the state level to the supranational state level. Another way of thinking about this is to recall the history of the early United States. You might remember that after the Revolutionary War with England, the 13 colonies agreed to unite together and form the United States. In the process, they gave up some of their independence and agreed to follow the central government in Washington, although initially it was in Philadelphia. In the beginning, under the Articles of Confederation, each state basically acted like its own country, and there wasn't much unity. But when the US Constitution was ratified, the states agreed to give up quite a bit of power to the central government. So in a way, you can think of the ratification of the US Constitution as 13 countries agreeing to form a supranational state. Now let's look at some examples of supranational states with different types of objectives. I'm going to show you a couple examples of each, and I'd like you to write down just the first example. If you'd like, you can write down the others too, but that's optional. The first type is supranational states that have economic objectives. And these are groups of countries that work together to promote trade. One example is the EU, or European Union. I'll come back to it in a minute. Two other examples are NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. All three of these supranational states work together to increase economic growth among their member states. Another type of supranational state is defensive. And these are really alliances of countries that promise to protect each other from foreign aggression. I already mentioned NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was formed during the Cold War by capitalist countries, mostly in Europe, but also including the US, to protect each other from attacks by the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union, in response, formed its own organization, which was called the Warsaw Pact. And the Warsaw Pact was designed to protect communist countries from attacks by capitalist ones. A third type are diplomatic organizations, and these have the goal of keeping peace among the member states. The most famous example is the UN, or United Nations, which includes most countries in the world. Another example is the AU, or African Union, which includes 55 countries all located in Africa. I want to end this video by explaining some benefits and drawbacks of joining a supranational state. The main benefit is that when states work together, they can accomplish their objective better than they can alone. But the main drawback is that they must give up some of their sovereignty. You learned that word earlier. And they're giving up that sovereignty or control to a higher authority. That higher authority might make a decision that one of the member countries doesn't agree with. But the country has to follow it anyway. That's what they agreed to do when they joined the supranational state. To go back to my analogy of the ratification of the US Constitution, the decision to ratify the Constitution was very controversial, and you might remember groups like Federalists and Anti-Federalists arguing about how much power the central government should have. People do not like to give up power, but joining a supranational state requires them to. And so it is this loss of sovereignty that makes supranational states extremely controversial. Let's look at this controversy through the lens of one supranational state, the EU, the European Union. A major benefit of the EU is that most member states, which form a group called the Eurozone, have the exact same currency, and that currency is called the euro. Every country on this map here that's shaded in blue uses exactly the same currency. And this is a benefit because it makes it very easy for these countries to do business with each other, and that helps their economies. But the drawback is that these member states had to give up their power to control the monetary policy of their country. Monetary policy includes things like setting interest rates on loans. Monetary policy is now under the control of a single bank. It's called the European Central Bank, and it determines monetary policy for all states in the Eurozone. Each of these states does not get to determine its monetary policy anymore. A second important aspect of the EU is a policy of open borders between most member states. And those states form a group within the EU called the Schengen Area. That's all these countries shaded in blue on this map. Open borders between these states makes travel and trade extremely easy. People no longer have to show passports when they cross borders between them. Traveling within the Schengen area is like traveling within the 50 states of the United States. You just drive through them without having to stop. But the downside is that each of these countries had to give up control of their immigration policy and agree to whatever immigration policies the EU government sets. In class, you'll look more at how these policies have created tension within the EU. Okay, now it's time to review the objectives, and if you don't know the answer to any of them, rewind the video and look again. I will see you in class. Bye, students.